All right. Let's see if you can all hear me. Sounds like it's actually working. That's great. My name is Henrik Fåhraeus, and I work for a company called Paradox in Sweden, in Stockholm. And I was invited here to talk a little bit about the games industry, and about the games we make at Paradox, and about the future of virtual reality, and a couple of other things. So it's going to be a fairly diverse little presentation here. But hopefully you can ask me some questions after this. I'm going to be in a panel debate as well. I'm not sure about the setup of that, but it's going to be interesting. All right. So, who am I and what is my background? Well, what do I know about making games? Well, I was actually a modder originally. I found this awesome game called Europa Universalis on the internet back in 2000. And I thought that it was good, but I could make it better, right? So I made a mod for this game. It was called the Improved Grand Campaign. And apparently it was pretty good because the company decided to hire me instead of suing me, like they could have done. And after that, I worked as a programmer, mainly on AI gameplay. I've designed some games. The original Hearts of Iron, if you've heard of that game, is actually mostly my design. So I worked in all capacities basically at Paradox. The company has grown a lot over the years, so it's hardly recognizable. When I started, we were like, I think we were 16 or 12 people in all. And today we're 200, so I don't really recognize the people at the company anymore. Yeah, so now I'm a game director. What does that mean? Well, it's a little bit similar to being a director of a movie, I suppose. It's kind of a creative vision for a game. I'm also the manager of all the designers of Paradox, which is a very responsible position, so to speak. I have a particular interest in emergent stories. I don't know if you've heard of that concept. It's kind of a buzzword in the industry these days. An emergent story or an emergent narrative is a lot like a little anecdote. If you play a simulation and events happen, even if they are individually kind of meaningless, your mind tends to string them together and imbue them with meaning, which becomes a story in your head. That's something we want to capitalize on in our games. I'm probably best known for 2 games, I suppose. Crusader Kings II, which was kind of a breakout hit at Paradox, and allowed us to make much more expensive games after that. And most recently Stellaris, which is my attempt at a 4X game that was released this year, actually. A little bit about the company. Paradox Interactive started out in the 80s and 90s with pen and paper, role-playing games, board games of various kinds. It was actually called something else back then. It was called Äventyrsspel, which means basically adventure games. But it's been reformed a couple of times. And it has a long and complicated story that I won't go into. A fun little aside though, when I started in 2000 it was called Paradox Entertainment, and the owners at that point decided it was much cooler to do Conan the Barbarian, so they actually bought the whole Conan the Barbarian copyright, trademark and everything and moved to Hollywood and are now doing the Conan movies and everything. So what they left behind was Paradox Interactive, where I work now, the computer game studio. And they didn't have much hope for it, so we were in kind of desperate straits. But we managed to turn it around, and these days, as I said, we're 200 people. We're both a publisher and a developer. We actually publish other people's games. So we're known for games like Magica, Cities Skylines. I saw someone wearing a Pillars of Eternity t-shirt as well. That's one of the games we publish. But I work for the development studio, and we actually make games, which is what I enjoy doing. PDS is known for historical grand strategy games. I don't know if many of you have heard of them, but we've been doing this since at least 2000. We call them grand strategy games, as opposed to normal strategy games. A normal strategy game would be something like chess, which is a super good game, of course, but it's not very grand. So what do I mean by a grand strategy game? Well, this is something I've thought a lot about. What is it that makes our games different from, say, Civilization or Total War and those games? Well, military conflict has to be central. It's a strategy game. When people think of strategy games, they probably think of a military conflict, warfare, World War II or something. So that's part of our formula. They have to be grand in scope, as you can tell by the name, grand. And what I mean by that, well, you have to have a huge map. If it's set in this world, it's going to be on a global scale. It's going to have super deep and complex mechanics. Again, to separate it from games like chess, for example. Chess is deep, but it's not very complex. And they're very accurate and plausible. And especially in our historical games, it's super important that the setup is very accurate. Because, if you start Europa Universalis 4, for example, in the year 1444, we want the world to look exactly like it did. And then after that point, you create your history, you and the AI actors in the game. But again, to keep the immersion in our games and to keep you interested, they have to be plausible in a sense, so that even when you start playing, they're supposed to run according to a plausible development. They can't diverge too much from what you think would be a plausible outcome. Our games also need to have a real multitude of playable entities. It cannot be a two-player conflict. It's not, a Cold War game would not be a very good Paradox game when you think about it, because there would only be two sides. Part of what makes our games interesting is that there are hundreds or even thousands of playable countries that are all doing their own thing and trying to conquer the world or gain power. And that's really a key point. Our games are real-time. They're not turn-based like Civilization, for example. Now, this is not a key point for making a good strategy game, but I think it's useful. So here are some games that we've made. We try to cover the entirety of human history, and my idea is that we at one point will be able to do that. So you will start at least with, the Sumerians or something in 5000 BC. That would be great. We're doing all we can. We still have some holes to cover. There is actually a game we made called Europa Universalis Rome, about the Roman Republic. It's not on here because it's not our current generation of games. As you can see, there are a lot of sequels there. Europa Universalis, this is the 4th game we made in that series. Hearts of Iron 4, which is the last game we released this summer actually, is also number 4. We tried to make each one in the series different though. They all have their unique identity, even if we try to make, cover the entirety of human history. So Crusader Kings II is a game about the feudal era and the joy of being a ruler. Could be good or could be bad, So my ambition with Crusader Kings II is to corrupt the world, but that's an aside. Anyway, so it's a game about characters. It has a lot of role-playing features, because that suits the era of medieval times. You think of kings and knights and rulers and their motivations. They ran countries, sure, but it was they who held all the power. Europa Universalis is a game set in the Age of Discovery. It covers the Renaissance up to the Napoleonic Wars. This is a game of nations. You play an actual country or the guiding spirit of a country, and you try to take it to greatness. Victoria is our oldest game right now in the current setup, Victoria 2. It's a game about the industrialization of the 19th century and about brutal colonization and the great political causes of the people. Then we have Hearts of Iron, where I designed the first one. The 4th one is actually designed by one of my best friends. It's a World War II game, but since it's a Paradox game, it also features, it's a lot freer in its setup than World War II. So you can actually play any country in the world, and you can play 3 years before the actual conflict happened. It's kind of difficult to get it right, because some people expect to play out World War II exactly as it was, and some people want to play Luxembourg and conquer the world. So that's a tall order. We try. And then there is my last game, Stellaris. And this is obviously the odd man out. It's a science fiction game set roughly 200 years in the future. And here we didn't have the crutches that history can provide, so we had to make up a lot of stuff. But that was also liberating in a way, because we were free from the shackles that history can be as well. So Stellaris is, I like to think of it as a historical game, except that the history isn't written yet, right? The future is history unwritten. Here's a screenshot from Crusader Kings II. It looks a little bit dated these days. It's from 2012, released on Valentine's Day, very appropriate, I think. As you can see, it has kind of a role-play character sheet up there in the left. This is your ruler, the guy I'm actually playing. He's High Chief of Lithuania in, I think, 1066. And we try to make these maps as accurate as we can and find all the information about the historical rulers and everything. Sometimes we fail, but usually our fans help us get it exactly right. So in Crusader Kings, you play these characters. They all have their different personalities, their different personality traits, and their skill sets, and their opinions of all other characters in the game, essentially. And that's the key to making this work, is that there are thousands of AI characters acting out in this world. It's not just you and another 7 or 8 players, it's thousands of characters. So here's a map of the entire world we cover in Crusader Kings, or most of it. We actually include India, but not the Far East. And here you can see the grand scope that we try to cover. And all these countries or areas, cultures I should say, work differently. So if you're playing in these steppes, it's going to be a completely different gameplay. You're playing a Khan or something, but it's going to be different than if you're playing a Viking or a Christian lord. And here's a screenshot from Europa Universalis 4. Again, I tried to center it on Lithuania. It was perhaps better times for Lithuania then, I don't know. At least more. At least you had more power. I don't know if that's a good thing. So this is a game about nations. It's actually a global game, but we can have a little bit of discovery and exploration. You see the white areas of the map are actually undiscovered. And with one of our expansions, we can actually make the new world different each time you play it, which is pretty cool. I'm going to skip past Victoria 2 because it's looking so dated now. We should probably update that game. What do you think? Any Victoria fans here? No? Alright, so this is Hearts of Iron 4. It's a cross between a war game and a grand strategy game. Now, you don't have to be very well versed in these genres, but say that a war game is more of a board game thing, where you have hexes and you have your NATO counters and everything, and it's all about moving and maneuvering your individual divisions and making clever maneuvers. Hearts of Iron 4 is not about that. We've really raised the level of gameplay to the top. You're playing the ruler or the spirit of the nation, and you're not really concerned with what you do with individual divisions. So we have this completely revolutionary battle plan system. You draw arrows on a map and assign your divisions to army group commanders, and then you hope that they do their job and that the plans survive contact with the enemy, right? Yeah. And here's Stellaris. Now, one of the main challenges with Stellaris was to keep it grand in scope. I mentioned that we had I think in Crusader Kings 2, we have at any given point 3,000 rulers. That is 3,000 characters with an AI. And there are about 25,000 living characters in the world at any given point. So we couldn't really translate that to the space game, but at least we tried. So, you know, it's a lot more than 8 or 10 different factions in this game. If you want to, you can also play in a smaller galaxy. I think the main failing with Stellaris, and I'm well aware of it, is that since everything is sort of procedural, every galaxy is a new galaxy, it can get a little bit flat in the mid-game when you kind of explored the cool things and then you realize, well, here's tentacle face alien number 3, I don't know who they are, I don't care who they are, I just want to kill them. So, well, we make mistakes, but I think it's still a pretty good game. And it's also by far our prettiest game. This screenshot here showcases what we can do these days at Paradox. Hopefully we can follow it up in our future games. This is some space combat, it plays out in real time, and although you can't give orders to individual ships, you can see how effective your weapon systems are. So we've come a long way, I think. Now, a crucial question when you to ask yourself when you make games is who will buy your games? And all right, it's good to see that a few people here at least want to buy our games. But when you drill down to it, you know, I need to, especially as game director, I need to philosophize a bit about how do we reach broader categories of players and so on. We really tried with Stellaris. We really tried to reach out to science fiction fans in general, for example, because it's a science fiction game. And we don't, you know, you saw our current crop of games, like 6 different titles or something. We don't want to cannibalize our own players by offering them too many options. So we're always trying to broaden our appeal. So games obviously are a form of entertainment. I think we can all agree to that. But what separates games from other forms of entertainment is interactivity. It's that you can do something. The player has agency, whereas a reader or an audience doesn't. And the backside of that coin, or the flip side, is that it takes effort. It takes some kind of mental exercise to play a game. Unless you can enter a trance state, which maybe you can tell us more about later. But anyway, it's a form of exercise. So sometimes you're not in the mood to play a game, you might want to watch TV or something. And different people seek different kinds of mental stimulation at different points in their lives. And this is a crucial point. It's part of the reason why mobile games have become such a huge success, is that they're so casual that I can play them on the bus, on the way to work, I can play them while I'm watching TV, and you know, it reaches out to people who wouldn't even consider themselves gamers. My grandfather can play Candy Crush. So when it comes to making money off games, here are some examples. These are the genre-leading games in 6 types of mental stimulation. World of Warcraft, of course you can mix and match these a little bit so they're not pure, but World of Warcraft will be the example of the most successful social shared type experience of gamers. Minecraft exemplifies for me creativity and building. You know, you create something. It's not really about conquest or solving puzzles or anything like that. It's like Legos, which is awesome. Some people wouldn't even call it a game, but I certainly think it is. And then we have what used to be the biggest genre in gaming, the action, adrenaline rush type genre. It can be anything from a MOBA like Dota 2 to a first-person shooter, but it's a lot about explosions and kind of a, you know, blood explosions shooting people in the head. Puzzle solving, which I already mentioned, very popular, has really exploded with the advent of mobile gaming. Candy Crush, of course, you know, is starting to annoy me because my wife always plays Candy Crush. When I think we're watching a movie together, she's playing Candy Crush. When I have friends over, she plays Candy Crush. You know, and she says that her, you know, female multitasking means that she's still aware of this game. I don't buy it. Skyrim, of course, exemplifies a flight of fantasy, escapism, getting away from this world for a while, being someone else, swinging a big sword, killing people again. Well, I like killing people, I guess. And then, of course, our own genre, strategy, which has many things in common with some of the others, but it's more about strategizing, making plans, and seeing them come to fruition. Also about dominating the opposition. Yeah. All right, so you probably recognize all of those games I listed. Well, they come from pretty big studios, except for Minecraft, which is a, you know, brilliant exception. I'll get more to that later. They all have sort of Hollywood budgets, and in the early days of computer gaming, you could get away with making a game on your own and still be revolutionary, of course. It's a young form of entertainment. It's only been around from the 70s, really. But these days, you see a lot of evolution and polishing and refinement. You don't really see these enormous steps forward anymore, I think at least. What this stems from is, of course, the anxiety that game makers have over these budgets. So a game like Grand Theft Auto 5, it costs $265 million to make. Well, that's a pretty awesome sum for a game. There are some movies that cost more than $1 billion, but you know, still it's getting very close to Hollywood budgets. And this means that you want to risk minimize. You're afraid to make mistakes. So you go with tried and true formulas and you refine on them, make them better. Blizzard are very good at this, and they take their time about it as well. They even can projects. You know, they sit around for 3 years, try to get something right, and if it doesn't work, we never hear about it. And they have the money to do that. And that's why you see their super polished titles like Hearthstone, you know, World of Warcraft, Diablo, all their games are really super polished. Now they happen to be successful as well, and we can go into more details about that and why some people fail at making World of Warcraft clones, but I won't talk about that. Fortunately, it's a very good day or good time to be a game developer these days, because you can make a game in your garage, you know, while you're living at home and still make a lot of money off it. And that is thanks to two great revolutions. One is crowdfunding. You can start a Kickstarter. As long as you're willing, you have the passion and talent to make a game, you can get other people to fund it for you. And the other is digital distribution. You know, platforms like Steam, which is the biggest one, you can get your game there and people can download it. You don't need to print out copies of CDs and get them distributed at Walmart and everything. So, yeah, I'll show you a list of games I think are truly revolutionary. And you can probably tell that it has kind of an overweight in the 80s and 90s. It was a very good time to be a gamer in 1992, because that's when most innovations were actually made, according to me at least. These are all games that directly started out a whole new genre of games. Rogue for example, is the original dungeon hack and slash. So Diablo 3, for example, is a direct descendant of Rome. Ultima 4 was arguably the first role-playing game on a computer that had a meaningful story and ethics. And Civilization, of course, you probably all know about that. Completely revolutionary. Sid Meier is a genius. Dune 2 was the first real-time strategy game and the direct ancestor of all the MOBAs, League of Legends and so on. Wolfenstein 3D was the first, well, the second actually, if you can be correct, it was Ultima Online, but it was Wolfenstein 3 that was the first 3D game with texture graphics that really took off. Ultima Online is the ancestor of massively multiplayer role-playing games, and so on. So what does it take to make a game? Well, I talked about the big budgets of the AAA studios already. Paradox has also grown, but when we made Crusader Kings 2, we were a team of 8 people, and we did it in about 24 months. It was me, I was the designer, project lead, and programmer, 2 other programmers, 2 content designers that did the historical database and the written narratives in the game, 2 artists, and 1 miscellaneous person, basically. So it was a pretty small team, but, just to show you what you can do. Let's compare this to other games. Both of these games have made more than $2.5 billion in revenues. One was made by a team of more than 1,000 people. And to me, that's sort of inconceivable almost. I cannot even imagine trying to lead a game development team of more than 1,000 people. Both are super great. I love them both. But one was made by one guy who had a regular job at the same time. And of course, he had a real Hollywood success story. He sold his company to Microsoft for, I think it was $2.5 billion actually. So if you're interested in getting into game development, that is the path I would recommend. The best way of getting into this industry is making something yourself to begin with. Show us you have the talent. I got into the industry by making a mod, so can you. And sometimes you can make a mod into a standalone game, like Gary's mod or DayZ. It started out as mods for other games. If you want to get hired by a games company, I still recommend you do your own game and try to crowdfund it. But if you want to get into an existing company, we're always looking for good artists. We're looking for programmers. And if you don't have any particular talents, there's still hope. You can get any job at the studio, maybe not a janitor, but you can be a play tester, QA person, and then you can show your passion and talent, and that's when we see people, basically. So that's how we have hired a lot of folks at Paradox. If you have the ambition of being a game designer, that's extremely hard. It's really hard to get into a company as someone who hasn't done anything before as a game designer. So again, show us what you can do first. Unfortunately these days, there are things like Patreon, Kickstarter, and Indiegogo. Make use of them. I'm not going to talk too much about this. These are kind of leaps, technological leaps forward in computer gaming or video gaming. Most importantly to what I have to say is kind of the advent of VR. There have been many false starts with virtual reality, but we're definitely seeing a trend where the gamer, the player, is getting more integrated physically into the game he's playing, or she. And I guess it started with the Wii remote, the Nintendo Wii. You were actually physically active. So that's what I call motion sense gaming there. There was also, of course, the Kinect, and it's still going on, this trend. And this is a step towards virtual reality in a way. Mobile gaming took everyone by surprise in the industry, really. It hasn't to do with VR, but it is hugely important for the way we think of making money in the games industry. Getting an app go viral on the App Store or something is incredible. And mobile games don't have to be super complicated either. Augmented reality is, again, a new buzzword. Everyone knows of Pokemon Go, I'm sure. augmented reality is when you see things that don't exist without taking mushrooms, right? So, you look through your phone or your Google glasses or something and you see things in reality that don't exist. High fidelity VR. This year we see 2 competing systems coming out, VR goggles. I'm very skeptical, and I'll get into that right now, actually. So, augmented and virtual reality, what do I think of them? Well, augmented reality, I think, it has enormous potential, not just for gaming, but especially for information retrieval. If I'm in a heated discussion with someone and I want to, find out a certain factoid, yes, I could bring out my phone and Google it on Wikipedia, but it would be much better if I just looked into my Google glasses and got the answer. So I think we'll see much more of that. I think it could even come to replace tablets and mobile phones. As for virtual reality, I'm a huge fan. I do lucid dreaming, if you know what that is. That is probably the best form of virtual reality today. It's better than any system you can buy. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of training to do it correctly. So it is the holy grail of gaming, but I don't think we're there yet, and I think it's going to be a long time in the future, depending on what you're after, of course. What does it mean for strategy games? Well, we could have things like this, and we're already having things like this. As long as you're looking through your tablet or mobile phone, you can see little moving characters. So I see us making a board game without a board or pieces or anything like that. And it would be better if you had some kind of visor or glasses, of course, instead of having to look through your tablet. But it's funny, when I looked for this picture, I Googled after a picture like this, and I found a Kickstarter already where they're doing exactly this. So, it's already happening. For virtual reality, I have a harder time seeing good applications when you're making strategy games. Virtual reality is great for first-person views. You are there in the world, interacting with other people and so on. But it's funny, one of my favorite games of all time, The Lords of Midnight, is from 1984. It was a first-person strategy game. You wandered around in front of your army in a first-person view, and you saw other armies in the distance, and you could walk up to them and talk to their generals, and recruit them, and you fought battles and so on. So it was a first-person strategy game. It's been done already. More recently, we have games like Mount & Blade, another fantastic game, which, incidentally, Paradox helped publish, the first one, where you ride around, recruit warriors, and have your war band. You get quests and experience various adventures, but you can also conquer the game world and become king. So yes, it's possible to make VR strategy games, I'm sure, but not all kinds of strategy games. A general wants to view a map and move pieces on the map and have a good overview at least of what's going on. We'll see. I'd love to try and make a game like this actually, but it's going to be a bit tougher. Of course, VR, I already mentioned that I don't really believe in these VR systems we're seeing right now. And the reason is twofold. The first one is, vision and audio sensation is easy. Those are the simple problems. We can overcome them. High resolution, stereoscopic vision, no problem. But it's when you're jumping into a car in Grand Theft Auto and you're actually standing up, but you're supposed to sit down and, drive the car, you get a sort of weird disconnect. And this is very hard to overcome. I don't really see a really good way of doing it, except for these weird things, right? And that brings us to the other problem. This is not a problem for the player so much, but more to make it economically viable in the games industry, is that they're the complete opposite of these casual games that you can play for a few seconds or minutes. A VR system is super expensive, and that's a problem right there. A lot of people can't afford it. They also take a lot of space. If you want to have stuff like this, sensorist suit, or some kind of running pad, you're going to have to dedicate a whole room to this, and not all people can do that. So it's a pretty hardcore thing. That's not to say it's not going to be a great experience, but it's going to limit the potential to a few rich people with a lot of spare room. So I think it's about time to wrap this up. It's wandered around a bit, but in closing, I think if you haven't tried strategy games, you should, definitely. And I'm not just going to plug our own games here. Crusader Kings II and Europa Universalis are great games. It's our type of strategy game. But if you're after a more action-y experience, you should play the Total War games, where you actually see your armies fight. Or Civilization, which is a fantastic series. If you're after something even more hardcore than the games we make, you could try the Operational Art of War. And I think, yes, sometimes it's fun to run around with a machine gun and killing people. Yes, I like killing people. But it's even better to order the guys around with their machine guns and let them kill people for me. So strategy games are great because it's good to be the king, right? So that's basically what I had to say. If you have any questions, I'll be here. Do we take questions? Right.
Question regarding AI for today's industry, like we see a lot of advancements in artificial intelligence. Oh, thank you. We see a lot of advancements in artificial intelligence and machine learning, and I was wondering, what do you think about its implications, especially strategy games, where, let's say, some political elements in various strategy games are very weak because they're just so hard to predict. But maybe artificial intelligence improvements, machine learning could help improve on that aspect, because as you mentioned, grand strategy usually involves battles, but it could be much more than that.
What do I think of the potential development of AI for especially the political layer or the economical layer in our games? Is that correct? Well, I having been an AI programmer for many years myself, I know how difficult it is. I'm slightly skeptical about how we can apply it to practical applications in games, really, because there's a lot of theorizing going on at universities and so on. But it's hard to apply that to a game. I still believe it has huge potential, and I want to see it more as well. So it's quite likely we'll try and hire people with that skill set, for example. I mentioned before that how important it is to us to have a multitude of actors, living actors, acting against the player and against each other for you to feel it is a living world. So it's, AI developments are key for us. I can say that much.
Are there any crazy ideas you want to implement in your games, but they're just crazy?
They had Sunset Invasion.
Are there crazy ideas? Sunset Invasion was my idea. That's a typical example of why we want to make crazy things, and we tried making a crazy thing. Some people like it, some people don't. If you don't like it, don't buy it. So I don't see what the problem is. But yeah, I always want to add new stuff into our games that are perhaps a little bit too controversial, and the legal department might stop me and say, wait a minute, that's going too far. But I don't know if you played Crusader Kings II, I tried to push the envelope all the time. So we're getting more and more weird things in there, yes.
What about World of Darkness DLC?
World of Darkness DLC?
For Crusader?
No comment.
Okay, so this one question is quite specific for me as a game developer wannabe, but are there any plans to make your Clausewitz engine that is made for Open Universalis and all your new games that are just made strategy? Are there any plans to make it public in some way?
Unfortunately not. I have talked to some people at the company of making older versions of Clausewitz open source, but I don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately.
We have to move on.
All right,
unfortunately.
Okay.
So, yes.
I'll still be around if you
taking part in the game developer discussion right now here, so you will still have some chance of asking him and the others some questions. And afterwards, as Henrik said, he'll be around here for the rest of the day, so you can ask him later in person.